I was just turning the corner, and suddenly, fragments of silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon, the Daylight Interviews. Right, so joining us this week are, I believe, Andrew from CGA Studio and Andy from Repixel8. I think I have that correct?
John from CGA, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you got me right.
I wasn't exactly sure which one of you from CGA was showing up.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Andrew. Andrew's the artist. So we've got 2 minutes. We've got another Andrew as well. Lots of Andrews on this project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Eddie, if you can change that in the heading.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, so how we like to get started is we like to get to know the people behind the studio, the projects, the games, and all that noise. And we do this by asking this particular question: what got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Oh, wow. Shall I go first? Yeah, go for it, Andy. So, what got me into video games? Well, I mean, I'm kind of revealing my age, but kind of started around the early 90s on a Commodore Amiga. Started playing around with development on that. There was like an application called Easy Amos, which allowed you to develop games. Then fast forward a few years, started developing games on the Xbox 360 through their Xbox Live Indie Games program. And then that was just a side project type thing. My day job was web development. Then about 6 or 7 years ago, just went full-time game development, and here we are today.
All right.
Cool. So I'm going to show my age even more so. I got into playing games, playing Valley on the Commodore PET, so that puts me back pre-Jurassic Age, I think, game-wise. And it wasn't my Commodore PET, obviously, because they cost a fortune at the time, but I had a rich friend who had a Commodore PET. Oh, sorry, hold on. I need to mute this. Then after that, I got my own ZX Spectrum, which was like the first kind of affordable, sort of decent home computer, and started programming in BASIC on that. And then that was really tedious, and because everything ran too slowly, and gradually learned assembly language, and then actually didn't really do game stuff after that, and went to uni and did computer science. But after that, and looking around for somewhere to work, Sony were the kind of only real employer in the area, so I ended up working for Sony, which was really cool. So it's been a fun kind of random career, really.
What branch of Sony did you end up working for?
Well, I was working for Psygnosis. So when they launched PlayStation 1, Sony kind of had the idea. I think Sony were working on a games console. I think it was a Nintendo game. Someone will know more about the retro history than me. It was either a Nintendo or a Sega console, and they were working with Sony, because Sony just invented the DVD, just the CD-ROM, and they were adding a CD-ROM instead of whatever it was you used to load games from before that, a cartridge or tape, to a games console. And I don't know, the project went to bits and fell to bits, but Sony kind of walked away from that and said, "Oh, that'd be good, but let's do our own." And that's where they had the idea of doing PlayStation 1. But when they came to set up in Europe, they realised that they didn't really have a publishing arm, and by chance, Psygnosis, who were Liverpool, we're not even in like a big city in the UK. We're based in Liverpool, which is quite a small city. But Psygnosis, who were our local publisher, who actually were the inheritor of the original kind of UK games scene, the very, very first game I ever bought, actually, I think, which was called Buzzed or Lunar Jetman or something like that. Literally, the first games you bought on the Spectrum were made in Imagine, who were in the would have gone bust, but they've become Psygnosis. very boring story. But anyway, they needed a publisher in Europe, and they bought. Sorry about this. And they bought Psygnosis. So it was Sony, but I wasn't really kind of working for Sony. It was owned by Sony. I was working with Psygnosis, who became Studio Liverpool, I think, in the end. And that team went on to do Motorstorm, and all the F1 games were produced at the studio. So we're working on. Oh, this is ridiculous. So we're working on a retro game, but I've sort of worked on some of the originals, I guess. So, yeah. Sorry about all the phone calls. I will go and turn that off. Oh, sorry.
Sometimes sometimes it can't be helped, and we are live as we are recording.
I'm really sorry. Yes.
You could mute it.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I can't talk and mute.
Oh yeah, you're on your phone. Gotcha. Sorry.
The wonders of technology.
Sorry, the phone connects to the computer. It goes off on every single medium at the same time, obviously.
It's interesting you say about that Sony console. I think I saw on eBay recently, it was a hybrid between the Super Nintendo with a CD-ROM added, which was apparently the original prototype for the PlayStation. Went for some ridiculous amount on eBay. It was well over $1 million.
Really? I remember seeing one. Jeez, should have stolen it, shouldn't I, or something?
Yes. It's a whole story that's, I suppose, rose into the level of legend mostly. But, the short thing is, Nintendo and Sony were working on a add-on for the Super NES. Nintendo backed out. PlayStation PlayStation gets born. Birth. However you put...
Insert proper tense here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really exciting times. No one had really played 3D games, so that just wasn't a thing. There was the PlayStation 1. It was a very limited machine, but it did have. I think it was the first kind of mass market thing to have 3D acceleration in it, and this is before Quake came out. It was quite exciting. I didn't really realise, because you don't know when you're doing something that it's new and remarkable, I suppose. Or involved in something even vaguely, and it changed games. And Sony changed games mainly actually for the reason of allowing independent publishers. I mean, for me, that's what really changed games. Before that, you couldn't work with Sega. You could probably, the stories of having to reverse engineer Nintendo dev kits. I think Argonaut did it in order to kind of make games for the NES or whatever. So Sony were the first people to open the door to everyone coming to games.
Right.
Yeah. Rare had to do that back in the day.
That's Rare. That's right. It's not Argonaut. It's Rare. Well, yeah. Rare. Reverse engineering the hard. They maybe did it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Argonaut did it as well. But it was different times. So I suppose we can fast forward a bit to CGA Studio and Repixel8. How did you end up at these entities?
Well, I've been sort of doing my own thing for quite a long time. I worked at uni for a bit teaching games design. I'm not the best. So it was fun. That was fun. But so we ended up as a kind of independent publisher doing, I don't know, kind of a real range of stuff. Not so much racing stuff, although we ended up doing a lot of driving stuff now. Andy's story is probably more interesting than mine.
Well, I don't know. So I was working at, you might have heard of Shazam, the mobile app, which mobile music recognition. So I was working there since 2000, since the start of the company, doing web development and mobile app development. And in my spare time, I was actually creating games for the Atari 2600 or VCS, as you probably know it, over there. And that's kind of how Repixel8 started. So I published a few games through Atari Age on physical cartridge. Then went on to create a couple of Sega Mega Drive or Genesis games, which also got published on physical cartridge. And then obviously those markets are minuscule, so it was only really kind of just side project, fun, kind of hobby type thing. Then the Xbox 360 came along, and Microsoft introduced. I actually remember what the name of. I'm pretty sure it was like Xbox Live indie games, which allowed self-publishing on the Xbox 360 console. Wasn't very well publicized, but it allowed you to publish games and have them on the actual Microsoft Store using, what did they use? It's a framework they developed called XNA, which is basically C# or JavaScript, I think it was. So I wrote a couple of games, like a top-down pseudo 3D, 2D racing game, and like a puzzle Tetris style game. Published those, and they actually sold really well. I think they're still in the store even to this day. We're talking about 2006, 2007, I think it was, but they're still in the store now. Then they shut that down suddenly, literally overnight. The whole service just got closed down, which is a bit of a shame. Then the Xbox One came out. There was nothing for a while. The only way you could publish games on Xbox One was becoming an official partner, which at that time was next to impossible. Then they released a program which still exists now called Creators Collection, I think it is. Creators, something like that. Which again allowed you to use tools like Unity, modern tools as opposed to hard coding from scratch, to develop games and release them on the console. But those got put into a separate section of the store. So, I mean, they didn't really get much exposure. So at that point, I thought, well, I'll try applying for the actual ID at Xbox, the official partnership program. Got into that, and then I think the first game I released on that was called Velocity G. It's like a Wipeout style, futuristic F-Zero-esque racing game, which, again, this is just evenings and weekends developing. Didn't really know much about professional game development back then. So launched it on the store, and it sold a few. And a few years later, started working on what was now Formula Retro Racing, the original version. It was only really a prototype. Stuck a video of that on Twitter, went viral. So continued working on that, launched it on Xbox, did pretty well. And then over the following years, signed it to PlayStation, did a PlayStation launch. And then, I don't know if I'm getting too far ahead of the story now. And then sometime, it must have been 2021, a developers conference in the UK. I bumped into John and his team from CGA at a conference in Brighton. We got talking over the lunch table, and that's kind of how we got working together.
Yes, because we were the first into lunch. We were the hungriest people in the conference. That was
Indeed. It's always a bit of a scramble into the lunchroom at these conferences.
So yeah, well, we worked on Nintendo stuff for a long time. I always really liked Nintendo's hardware and the platform, and we were lucky enough to get, I don't know how we managed to blag it. We managed to blag Nintendo dev status on the Wii of all things. And we did a game called Monsteca Corral, which was like a download game on the Wii. Actually didn't sell that well, but we had like 1 million downloads of the demo or something insane, because like who the hell downloads games on a Wii? And as a result, we were able to kind of parlay that relationship into getting Switch developer status. So we've done a few games on the Switch, mostly kind of, I guess you call them pocket money games, mostly games that are going to go at 99p, a couple of quid, sort of fun, but nothing very deep. And then I was like, oh, Andy, why don't you put your game on Switch? And he didn't have dev status, and obviously we know the Switch really well. So that's kind of how the relationship started. And we did the first version of Retro Racer, which I was playing the other day, and isn't as good as the new one, I have to say, because we've done a lot more work on it since.
That is true, actually.
No, but the game's great, but the Switch port is not as good. You know, I don't know. They're different, aren't they? Even though you think you're making the same game, it comes out, particularly with a racing game where you're making tiny, tiny decisions which have fundamental effects on the way you play and race. You know. Like,
I go back and play the original now and I think, oh god, it's awful compared to the new version. But I mean,
I loved it at the time. You know, I loved playing it. It was actually one of the, because it was nice actually, because I just did the port, and or me and Ben did, mainly me actually, that one did the port, and So I hadn't, when I don't know if you guys have worked on games, but you work on a game and you just get sick of it. It could be the best game in the world, but you'd be sick of it because you looked at it all day, every day for a year, 2 years, whatever it is, or 5 years if it's a big game, and you obviously get sick of it because that's human nature. But the great thing with that first game was it only took me a couple of months to do the port, so I didn't get sick of it, enough time to get sick of it, which was quite nice. But the new one is, it's been, we've had more time, so it's been nice.
Right. So I suppose that does bring us to Formula Retro Racing World Tour. Now, I suppose my first question is this a sequel? Is this a remake? What is this game in relation to the first Formula Retro Racing?
I think it's a sequel, isn't it, really? It's not a remake. It hasn't got the same content. Right?
I think so. So originally, it was planned just a kind of an upgrade to the original with like 8 new tracks. I don't know how many. I think it's got 18 tracks at the moment. We've got a few more planned. But pretty much, it's like when you renovate a house or restore a car and you work so much on it, you kind of think, is there any of the original car or house left? Because
Thesis is boat, isn't it? Whereas, everything's been replaced. There's some of the drives the F1 car. We've got the kind of classic race car, and we've got drift cars. The classic race cars drive pretty much the same, I guess. I don't know. Differently. Yeah.
It's been a lot of tweaks though. So the AI has been overhauled a bit. The way collisions work, things like that.
Yeah, and those sort of things have massive impact on the. This is what I mean about it's just tiny. I mean, we spent the last month wrangling tiny decisions basically because they, you can take the fun out, put the fun into the game by tiny decisions about collisions and the weight of collisions and a lot of tweaking, I suppose, tuning, I guess, because we're not doing a racing sim. It's not set in stone. I presume if you're doing an F1 sim, the output has to match driving an F1 car, but that's not what it is. And equally, it's not a kart game either. It's somewhere in between. So it's
so I guess the handling is kind of more like what feels fun as opposed to what is actually realistic.
Yeah, I'm not sure driving an F1 game would actually, an F1 car in the real world actually be fun. Probably, it'd probably be really stressful. Not that I've tried, but
I mean, it always looks that way on Drive to Survive.
What, they look stressed or having fun?
Stressed.
But you get massive torque in your neck, so apparently it's incredibly fit. So little things like that you don't notice. If you just,
That is true. Although I've spent the past pretty much the whole week this week playtesting and tweaking balance, and it is actually mentally draining at the end of the day. Got to walk back to the office exhausted after playing the game the whole day. You don't realise how much being super focused on a racetrack actually takes it out of you.
Oh no, it really does. The other thing is when you drive after driving in a game, it's really confusing. There's always a moment when you set up and you don't know what you're doing.
You mean I can't drive at full speed around the town?
Exactly. I have to brake. Oh my god!
Crashing actually has implications.
Yeah, I don't get regenerated 50 meters down the track, whatever it is. Yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff goes through your head. But it's been fun, but it's been hard. Doing the Switch one's been quite hard because it is a less beefy machine, I guess, than the other platforms. So, and we really wanted to get 60 frames per second, which I think we've pretty much got. That's been quite tough. And it does make a big difference if you can get that. You want that. I don't know why it's so much better, but it does feel sort of more solid. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember when we first talked about the original, doing the port for Switch, I was kind of skeptical if it even ran about 20 FPS.
Yeah, I think the first build we did was about 10, and now we're at 60, so it's not thanks to me. Thanks to Ben, he just loves kind of tinkering, I suppose. And it looks better as well. So it looks better and it runs faster. So yeah, a lot of tinkering, but it's been fun doing that.
I suppose, what's the difference between porting to the Switch versus developing alongside the other versions from the ground up?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, actually. Yeah, when you port, well, I mean, it's good to be economic, even if you're making the most complicated game on the hardest, fastest platform in the world. It's actually always good practice to approach coding in certain ways that are very mindful of frame rate and performance, because it's obviously different when you're picking up something it was running at 60, I think, on Xbox, but I always think the Switch. I always think Unity on the Switch we use Unity. There's only really Unity or Unreal nowadays, and we use Unity, which is slightly better in terms of frame rate. I always think Unity on the Switch is a really, really good port as well, but it didn't run very fast when we started. But I don't know, Andy. What do you think about it? Because you've been doing the PlayStation and the Xbox in parallel, haven't you?
Yeah, I guess the problem is, because the game's not exactly, let's say next-gen graphics, you kind of think, well, I'll just stick in a few 2K textures, 4K textures, run it on the Xbox and PlayStation. It doesn't really have, it always runs at 60 FPS, no matter what. So you kind of take shortcuts, as it were. Don't worry so much about optimization because it's relatively graphically simple. It should run pretty well on those platforms. So I know the Sky, for example, was a particularly nasty one. I think the Sky is a 16K image or something. 16 megapixel image, which obviously is fine on next gen hardware, but then take that to the Switch, and that's probably just going to consume all the video RAM. So it's like all these. You probably had a nightmare actually. All the stuff I'd left.
No, it's fine. You look for them. You look for them straight off. That you get them easy. The harder one was the weird bit, because everyone's expecting the game to run at 60 frames, I guess, in terms of reviewers and stuff. But actually, yeah, okay, we're not making, I don't know, whatever the current, I've totally forgotten the names of any current state-of-the-art racing games. We're not making something that graphically looks like a state-of-the-art racing game, but actually there's a lot of physics going on. It doesn't drive, though it's a retro game, it doesn't drive like a retro game. It has like a modern sensibility to the driving. And
each car is, we don't do any faking with the cars. Each car has fully under AI control, even if they're off the screen. They're still
that was something we debated changing, wasn't it? But we didn't need to. If we wanted to go to more cars, we'd have to fake it out, I suppose.
Yeah. But one thing people, especially reviewers, but people in general, don't realise that most, if not all, driving games on the Xbox One, the previous generation, not so much the Series S and X, still around at 30 FPS. But there seems to be this constant strive for 60 frames per second.
When we worked on PlayStation 1 and 2 stuff, it was just like, well, you were going to get 25, weren't you? Is it the European TVs?
Oh, yeah, so you can slow it over
it was like, you were fitting in with a stream. You wouldn't even have thought of going for 50 unless you were maybe doing a 2D arcade game, but nobody did 2D arcade games on PlayStation because that wasn't a novelty. Everything was 25 or 30, but I suppose it's progress, isn't it? It's good. So,
yeah. But now it's all about 120 FPS on the next gen.
Well, I guess we've got that, haven't we, in this game? That's what I love about this game, actually, secretly, because you sort of know it's not going to be too hard. Once you've done the Switch, everything else is going to run nice. So we know we can do Quest 2 at some point. We know we can do PlayStation VR, and we'll get the 120 in each eye or whatever it is that you need. So we'll get that really high frame rate and don't have to take those kind of shortcuts. Or quality. The experience. Was it Dirt that came out in VR recently, and everyone was criticising it for not looking as good, but obviously it wasn't looking as good because it's VR. It's a tough platform.
Would it be a easy conversion to VR?
It's already running in VR really nicely. That's going to go out on the Steam as PC VR. It's really sweet, actually. I can't do VR. I'm too old and get too sick. But
Same.
Really. The saddest one is someone I follow on Twitter who is an absolute expert in VR. He's the VR blogger, and he couldn't do the PlayStation VR. It was making a motion suit.
Yeah, my first experience of VR was actually playing this game. I bought the Quest 2, took up to the PC just to try it out. Literally the first time I played I think it was the oval track, literally fell off the chair. I was like, okay. So,
yeah, it's for young people. Driving games and VR. I mean, some people, it's like driving. Some people don't get motion sick, and some people do. I'm one of the ones who does. Really, I think.
yeah.
It's also very much harder when you're debugging in VR because when you're developing and you're debugging something, you tend to want to look around, or you end up slightly off center. All those kind of horrible things that make you feel worse. But Ben, who has done all the VR, he basically lives in VR. He works in VR all day, and then he goes on VR all night for leisure. So,
right. I have to say, it's pretty amazing in VR.
It's amazing. It's really, really nice. So we haven't done the PlayStation VR because last time we did a PlayStation VR thing, took ages to get through quality assurance. So we'll do it as a separate release or an upgrade or something. And we'll do Quest Quest apparently is quite hard to get on the store, but we'll probably do a Quest one at some point. But it's great. It's mind-blowing. Totally mind-blowing, actually. I don't know why. Particularly the Las Vegas level. I feel like I'm in Tron when I'm driving. It's just beautiful.
I suppose that does bring me to my next question. Where do you race in World Tour? Like, what cities?
Oh, we've done all the classics. Do you want to do it, Andrew? You might know.
Oh, yeah, hang on. I was literally just about to bring up the list because I can't remember. I know we've got Montreal, Rome, London. I'm just going off memory now. Paris, Tokyo, Berlin. There's a few US ovals. Miami, we've got a drift track. God, there's 18 tracks in total at the moment. I mean,
I would say they're loosely influenced by the real locations. We have we haven't, because it's not you couldn't race around London in 200 miles an hour, whatever it is, because you'd die. but we've sort of tried to take landmarks and a bit of influence from the layouts and the roads and actually someone said to me, "Oh, your Las Vegas track's much more interesting than the real Las Vegas track because that's out in a desert somewhere." It's just out in a desert somewhere, the real Las Vegas track. Ours is kind of down the mall, down the what they call it, the main drag, the drag in Vegas. So.
I think is that the track that's just playing on the stream at the moment?
I think it
Las
is.
Vegas. It's a night track. It was the first night track we did. It looks amazing.
Yeah, that's my favourite visually. It's not my favourite. I quite like it driving as well. It's definitely my favourite visually.
Yeah. And then we did San Francisco with the famous Lombard Street, the twisty downhill.
We haven't coloured it red. We should have. Someone put it out. We should have coloured that bit red. So that's the colour of the Lombard Street.
Yeah, that's true.
There you go. Might do that on a patch at some point. Yeah. And again, though, you couldn't drive a race car down that zigzag hill because it wouldn't work. So we've done as tight a zigzag as we could do in the context of the game, sort of thing. So
145 miles per hour.
Yeah. So, I've been up there at 20 miles an hour. That's about it. And we obviously got the Golden Gate. We're trying to get all the things that I love. Outrun and all this. Well, there's no Outrun, is it? Which is the one that classically had the Vegas, the Golden Gate Bridge, and I can't remember what game that was.
Oh, that was Virtua Racing, which a lot of people compare this to, even though they play completely differently. I suppose it's the visual aesthetic. But,
probably.
Yeah. I mean, that, and I think the Formula car in general, like Virtua Racing had a pretty prominent Formula One car, to my reckoning.
Yeah.
Though this clearly has a expanded roster, as we see a clearly not Formula One racing car on the track right now.
We wanted to have the drift race. Again, I'll forget which game it was, but the ones where you take your ass around the corner, and that's part of the driving. What would that be? What games were they?
Like Ridge Racer or
Ridge Racer. That was the one. I remember
yeah.
playing Ridge Racer in the pub. Like, you know, it's just like you had to get the drift or you didn't get the times, sort of thing. Like,
yeah. I discovered sorry.
No, come on.
I was just going to say, I discovered an original as a where we're living. There's a indoor go-karting track. Went there the other day, and they have an original Daytona 4-player machine set up in the corner, looking sad, still working. So
well, I bet they've changed the coin. I bet it's not 10p though.
I think it's on free play actually.
It's on free play. Oh my god!
Yeah, that was the most exciting thing about the whole day out. Forget the go-karting. Just want to play Daytona.
Yeah, so we're trying to get that vibe and that fun. And actually, I mean, Andy's, I think, has done something a bit special with it because it doesn't really drive like any drift game I've driven, really, and that's what. But it's sort of different and fun. Would you say? I don't know where you've got your drift mechanic from, particularly on that.
It's mainly through experimentation. Again, a lot of these drift games, you have to like hold down the brake, the accelerator, be a certain speed, hold your breath, cross your fingers before you can actually drift, and it's nigh on impossible to get around the corner. So I kind of wanted to make it fun rather than realistic.
Honestly,
So
just
you
looking
can-
at the footage, it kind of looks similar to Burnout's drifting style, but I don't have the game in front of me to play, so I can't really, you know.
I think that's fair. Actually, I've not played Burnout for ages, but yeah, it's not a classic drift. It's a fast drift, actually, really, because it doesn't take anything off your speed.
No.
So I guess in Burnout you're trying to crash, aren't you? So that's about right. Yeah, that would be fair. I know it's really good. It's really good fun, actually. We've put it in front of a few people who've really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to. Obviously, I guess we'll get some feedback on that once it goes out, because the extra tracks and the drift are the two big things.
Yeah. Drift was only added in as an experimental kind of touch, and now it's like a lot of people seem to love the whole drift thing.
I think it's like half the game really now, isn't it,
Yeah.
in terms of the content, number of cars, and you can basically. We haven't quite split it out as much as we would ideally, but it'd be nice to have a lot more. What we call the meta game, the challenges around playing. It'd be nice to do a lot more with that. But I guess that'll be the next game we do or something. But it'd be nice to have sort of drift challenges and race challenges and that sort of stuff. But that's something we can look at down the line, or as a patch.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
Tokyo Extreme Racer.
Like in a multi-story car park or whatever, like Tokyo Drift.
Something like that.
It'd be fun to be jumping stuff, wouldn't it? Like a Motorstorm or something.
Mm.
So many things you can do with this, but I guess you have to stop somewhere and say that's a game. Because you go on forever, couldn't you? So.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because we've already added in a ton more than we were actually planning. I remember original conversation must have been back in July last year. So we've actually got this to completion pretty quickly, because we only had the initial discussion back in July. Because I remember I was outside in the middle of summer. It's 40 degrees here, and we had that original call to create a kind of expanded version with 8 new tracks to launch at Christmas, and now we've got an expanded version with 18 new tracks, 8 new cars, improvements all over the place. So yeah. Yeah,
but we're launching in March, so we sort of did it longer. Well, it just had to work out. But I mean, so we've had the same core for the last 6 weeks, but we've just been running around in circles trying to get through all the various console quality assurance processes. That's the other thing about doing a multi-platform release as a small studio. I think big studios must have just these insanely large teams to get a multi-platform release out. So it's tough getting through.
It's so much work. It's unbelievable. It's almost as much work publishing on the consoles as it is developing the game itself.
Yeah, and every time you make a mistake, it's another 2-3 day loop to get back into test, even though it might only take you 10 minutes to fix the bug. It's like, I know we don't have professional QA teams, so the QA is what we do ourselves. So it's I guess that's good in a way because getting more love in the game. But on the other hand, you know, you go feature blind or defect blind sometimes because you've been looking at stuff for too long and it's your own work or whatever, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, that's been a tougher part of the. That's been tough. It's tough. It's always tough. Yeah, Nintendo, harsh but fair, as we like to say. You know, it's been good. The last couple of weeks have been good though, because Nintendo and Sony have been kind of piggybacking bugs and speeding us up by finding different things, so which they all would have eventually found. So yeah, it makes for a lot of polish because you have to fix every tiny thing.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess as much as I like to complain about bugs, it's better that they find them than some major reviewer on YouTube.
Yeah, God, yeah, no, totally. We've had that in the past as well. Yeah, no, I mean, as a small studio, it's sort of studios in this case, you're always playing catch up. I remember we did a game and it was reviewed against Mario Kart. And I'm like, that's not fair. You know, Mario Kart's been around for 20 years, budget infinite, you know, tiny game made by 2 or 3 people. And you're saying it's not as good as Mario Kart. Well, I think I knew that, you know. So it's always really, really hard because, I mean, I get that people are spending money in this, but then often our kind of games cost a lot less than the big games. But you're always still put up against them, because I think actually, in a way, it's fair because it's people's eyeballs and it's their time and it's their investment of time, and that's what you're really measuring. And they don't care whether it's you on your own or 100 people or 1,000 people in some of these games, you know. So it's like. But
my favourite review, which I might get a T-shirt made up with a slogan, was graphics aren't as good as Gran Turismo.
Do you really get that?
Yes.
I should point out that even if we made a level that looked as good as Gran Turismo, Andy would sack it off because he'd say it looked too good and we were breaking the aesthetic. Like, you know, so.
Yes, it is actually. I mean, it's so tough to actually be restrained enough in order to, because next thing you know, you got reflections creeping in and ambient occlusion.
Oh my goodness me! You can't have any of that nonsense. Nothing that happened after 1990 here. Garage shading only. Yeah, our Andy was building the levels, and Andrew told him to kind of dial it down. Like they were getting too good, like not too drifting into technique. I mean, it's nice not working with textures.
Ambient occlusion. Send that heretic to the stockade.
Yeah, well, I'd love to take all that and put ambient occlusion in, but that'd be another product.
Maybe we should do a hidden level to unlock. Which has...
Yeah, everything looks like Gran Turismo.
And then one that looks like Tron.
Well, we did something the other day that did a Tron design. It's lovely doing. In fact, that's what where the Vegas look, I think, is. It looks like as if you'd taken Vegas and put it into Tron. I think. If you let Andy do anything, it'll turn out like Tron, probably. He should be working on the new Tron game, really. So, but yeah, it'd be fun to do something like that. Well, Andrew had for his next game, which we haven't revealed yet, you have a different aesthetic, don't you, for a racing game?
Oh, yes. Pretty excited about that. Still won't be able to use ambient occlusion, though.
That's true.
Or reflections.
That's true. It's more of a line edge type game, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're moving on. You're moving up to what's that Sega Mega Drive game? Jet Set Radio.
Oh, yes.
On. Yeah, we'll move on with a couple of years. What we're allowed to do.
Well, maybe we should take it back a few years with sprite scaling, pixel art.
That'd be quite fun.
Yeah.
Well, I love Simpsons Hit and Run. I think that's my favourite driving game. So we could go and make something like that. Motown Madness. Actually, that was the game I probably played the most. If you remember that, I think it was the launch title on Xbox. Right? So it's slightly next gen, like in our world. It's 20 years old now, the Xbox, isn't it? Or is it older than that? When was the first? No, it's probably older than that, isn't it? When was the first Xbox?
Jeez. Was it really? Yeah, I guess it must be because
my kids
PlayStation came out.
Yeah.
95.
Xbox was a competitor to PlayStation 2, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that was our
that's
first
right.
one.
Yeah. Because I remember going around to my mate's house. I didn't have a Xbox and playing Halo.
The original
Well,
Xbox came out in 2001.
Yeah, I remember. Because I remember our kids were like 1 or 2 years old, which ages me massively. But I remember going and babysitting, and that just involved sitting and playing Halo. If the child had actually woken up or something, God knows what would have happened. But
yeah, I skipped the first Xbox. I kind of thought, what? Microsoft releasing a console? This is ridiculous.
I liked that. It looked ugly as hell, didn't it? I liked all the games on that. Some great games on that. I think I didn't really have PlayStation 2 for some reason. I must have just had Xbox in that generation. How did I manage that? How did I miss out on PlayStation 2?
Yeah, I had the PlayStation 2. I didn't have a PlayStation 1. My housemate at the time had the PlayStation 1. But the only game we had was Puzzle Bobble, or Bust a Move, as it's known in some territories. Played that pretty much like 8 hours a day when we should have been studying.
I used to get a free game a month because I worked for Sony, and there were like about 10 really good games, but it was only a Sony game. It had to be a Sony or a Sony, whatever they call it, second party studio game. So there were about 5 or 6 really good games, and after that you were just getting the other games. Some of them were good though. And then that was fun.
It's only recently I actually got into the original Wipeouts.
I loved that first Wipeout. I was sort of there. I wasn't on it. I was sort of on one of the ports. I can't really claim to being on Wipeout as such, but I was definitely there when it was being made, and it was a great game. But I do remember that. But it was made to the restrictions of the platform. The reason the curves were so tight on the original Wipeout is because PlayStation didn't have proper polygon sorting, so it would kind of draw it in, on a kind of bucket system. You'd bucket sort the polys for distance from the camera, then draw them in, so you'd get these horrible kind of draw-ins as you went around the corner. So then they'd have to tighten, the tracks would get tighter and tighter to avoid the kind of drawing. So it was kind of almost a side effect of the... And I liked the difficulty of the first one. I didn't enjoy it. I liked the fact it was dead hard. You'd never make a game that hard nowadays.
No.
And apparently the later games weren't as hard. I only played a couple of them. But yeah, that feeling of having to learn to... I suppose it's a bit like Drift, isn't it? Having to learn to kind of float around the corners. Maybe that's a little bit the vibe we've got in the drifting, actually. You're sort of floating around the corners a bit.
And I think that's the thing which differentiates Formula Retro Racing from other kind of retro-style racing games, is that in this game, you actually have to drive the car. It's it's kind of like a cross between arcade and sim. I think some people call them simcades. It seems to be the term that's coined at the moment. But yeah,
I like that. Yeah, trying to get that message across to people. Simcade's nice. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a kart game. You can't do what you want. You do have to brake. You do have to respect the corners. You do have to drive a racing line. But equally, it's not a sim game, I guess. Yeah. Simcade. I like that.
Simcade.
Cool. A good name for a game.
And what is the state of the game right now?
Touch wood, it's done. It's in QA with Nintendo. From my point of view, it's been there for the last 2 days, which is a really good sign because they're so quick. They boot you out straight away if you're not through. Have we heard from Sony yet?
Sony's also in QA. Fingers crossed that will go through. Microsoft is ready. So
we haven't quite put the final Steam build up. Probably do that next week. Well, not final. With Steam, we're going to go into early access because there's a few features that we want to add that we haven't yet done that are kind of more Steam PC. The problem with the Steam PC audience is the variety of hardware and desire and experience is fundamentally infinite. So we're going to go into early access to kind of have some time to kind of add steering wheels and address networking, all that sort of stuff. But the console ones are, we might do one more pass. Probably do one more pass on the difficulty. And the tweaking of the one more pass on the tuning of because it's a classic race game. You've got the whole idea of checkpoints and time running down to checkpoints in the main mode. People play as the arcade mode, and that's how they work. It's very much a classic slot machine arcade checkpoint game. Again, the timings on those checkpoints so that they're challenging but not impossible. And
it's not like super hang-on level of frustrating.
Yes. Well, the number of times you seem to get to them with only like no seconds, or just like you're coming across the line and you time out. That's about what you want in a way. But then obviously we're all different, aren't we? You know, I'm not a particularly good game player, which is an asset in some ways. So if I can do it, it's probably okay for beginners. Problem is I can't do, no way I could do the advanced. You know, people were putting in times on the last game that we couldn't do.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I genuinely thought I was pretty good at the game after like putting in goodness knows how many hundreds of thousands of hours. And then we took it to EGX in the UK, which is like the UK's largest video game conference. And then I was at the top of all the leaderboards, obviously. And the first guy just came along and played the game. Like, took about 5 seconds off my lap time. So I was like, okay. And then that just set the tone for the whole weekend. Everyone coming along was just like absolutely smashing it. So you kind of think, yeah, it's hard to know what the audience is going to be, whether they're going to be like.
And I think that's where the Simcade thing comes in, because you do need that bit of skill where you know, if you watch real races, you break into a corner because that increases the grip as you go through the corner, and that's what distinguishes a good racing driver, I guess, or racing driving from driving. You know, applying of brakes in order to get more speed, almost.
Yeah,
and there's enough in the game that you can do that.
By the end of the weekend, like players are discovering like all these weird techniques. If you wiggle the car on the straight, you get an extra 1 or 2 miles per hour. If you can use the gravity to brake into corners. So they're like purposefully going off the track.
Usually those are bug squashed in QA, but here we are now.
You can actually write
not a bug.
Oh yeah, yes. You can write a strategy guide on this. It's stuff people are figuring out just to shave like 0.1 seconds off a lap. It's
quite satisfying if you can hit another car into the corner, bounce off, and get around the corner quicker. You're allowed to do that in the game, just about. It doesn't penalise you so heavily on the damage. It's not a kart racer, but that's a thing you can do.
Now, as I understand it, you had a recent Kickstarter for the game this past month.
Well, we didn't. We were going to, and we didn't, because it got messy in terms of time. Because we had a hard release date accidentally, maybe on purpose, I don't know. We'd agreed with Nintendo a hard release date of the 31st of March. That we couldn't cancel, and then it was looking like the Kickstarter was going to overlap the release date, and the people doing the PR were like, "Oh no, you can't do that." I think we will come back and still do a Kickstarter, because the aim of the Kickstarter was to do a physical edition and to do some of the Kickstarter type things as well with the audience and content.
Yeah. And we had some pretty exciting, still have some pretty exciting rewards in the Kickstarter, which I'm pretty sure people are like.
So I think we will come back and do it. We'll see how the launch goes, see what the reaction's like. Yeah, I think we'll come back and do it, but it'll be in a couple of months' time. It was quite funny because we've been advised by lots of different people, some of them formally, like the PR people we work with, some of them informally, just as, you know, people in the community on Discord, etc. And we kind of came across a bit of a Kickstarter guru. He wasn't charging us for his knowledge, but he was like basically telling us what we were doing wrong, and not in terms of the game, but just in terms of how you're going to run your Kickstarter campaign. And so he was like, you're going to have to take more time. But then the more time was working, I think we probably would have got a successful Kickstarter away.
Yeah, I think so.
Just about. But we'd have been close. We weren't asking for a lot of money. We'd have been close. We'd have either just skimmed it or just missed it, sort of thing. We'd have done okay. But I think the idea of stepping back a little bit, trying to do probably a collector's edition or a master edition or something else. I don't know exactly what, or maybe just the same but with physical goods. We're not really sure, but yeah, something. I'd like to. We're getting into the vibe of Kickstarter. It's a totally different thing. It's nothing like anything I've done before.
Yeah, I mean, you don't realise how much work it actually requires just to. I mean, it's probably as much work to launch a successful Kickstarter as it is to launch a successful game.
It's probably more, actually. It's probably more work to launch a success, particularly because so few digital games have been successful Kickstarters. Obviously, if you're doing a board game, or a role-playing game, book game, whatever. There's a history of those being successful Kickstarters. Much less so I mean, when Kickstarter first started, there were a lot of kind of really high-profile games, some of which did get made, like Ukulele, but some of which didn't. They just disappeared. And it really put people off, I think, backing games in Kickstarter.
Yeah, there were a couple of high-profile racing games, which I shan't mention the names of, that failed horrifically on crowdfunding campaigns. Not because I think they got funded, but unfortunately the games never saw light of day.
Yeah, it's not really fair. There should be some sort of recourse to getting your money back, I guess, if the person doesn't. But it's not the point of Kickstarter, is it? The point of Kickstarter is to fund the venture. So I feel that we don't have that risk. I feel that we know that we can deliver. So I think that it would be really fun to do. I think it's a different journey that we would be really good to kind of. In fact, it'd be really nice to kind of get in a cycle of sort of game every year, but Kickstarter in between every 6 months or something like that. It'd be a really, really fun way of doing things. Do it properly. This time we'll probably do it arse about face. Can I say arse about face? We'll do it the wrong way around. We'll probably do the game then the Kickstarter, which is that's not entirely unusual. I think people have done that, because you've made a game, but then you want to kind of bring it into a box. Basically, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry for those who were waiting for our Kickstarter because it hasn't started yet.
And what do you hope to accomplish with the Kickstarter in regards to World Tour here?
We would like to create the box edition so we can give people a game in a box because it's a retro game, and I feel that that's a big thing. And there's lots of minimum unit numbers on that sort of nonsense. We would like to make a kind of really driven community that we could work with. It's not a very big community, like a really, people are passionate about these kind of games, and if we can find a couple hundred people who wanted to kind of come in and, sort of design levels with us, fight for certain content, or just customize their car, we'd probably do more customize that. So the things that aren't in the current game that we've obviously more content would be developed as part of the Kickstarter. Some kind of like customization of teams, decals, all that sort of stuff would be nice. I think we're allowed to do that. It stays within the style, just about. What else? There's loads of good things, weren't there? I can't remember what they were now. What were the other ideas?
Yeah, we had things like sponsorship billboards at the side of the tracks, and what else did we have? Can't even remember. There's loads. There's a whole list of. I mean, that's the usual physical goods as well. Like we had T-shirts and trophies. And
an art design book as well. That's right. We're going to do a trophy. We had so much fun making trophies. So when we did this games conference, we made these little trophies, and I ordered them. We didn't make them. We ordered some trophies, but you kind of customize them. And I thought they'd be rubbish and tiny, but they weren't. They were really nice. So they kind of make custom trophies for players.
Oh yeah, and everybody at the conference wanted to get their hand to that trophy at the end of the day. We had a trophy for each day, so it's like competition was so fierce. It was actually quite amazing to see those. Even people. So our stand was just a few rows down from Codemasters' F1 game, and some of their developers were coming across playing the retro racing in order to try and get their hands on the trophy, which is quite amusing.
Must get some more actually for we're going. What's the conference going to? Insomnia, which I'm not going to. I'm going to be in South Korea of all places, but Andrew's going to Insomnia.
Yeah, in a few weeks, that's the other. I think that's the other big games conference, expo in the UK.
Yes, we should get some more. There'll be more trophies for that. We kind of gave away a trophy to the fastest lap of the day, didn't we? That was the kind of. We were trying to mimic the Top Gear, which I presume you have in the States. Top Gear board that they have.
Yeah, we even made up the kind of brushed aluminium style board with the magnetic strip names written on.
Yeah, should get the stick down.
Oh gosh, that's a good idea. Actually, one of us needs to dress up as Stig.
Yeah, they wouldn't know it wasn't the real one, would they?
It'll have to be a low poly version.
Yeah, no reflections off the helmet
or ambient occlusion.
Yeah. Excellent.
And have you settled on a price point for World Tour yet?
Yeah, we've definitely gone up the ecosystem. It varies across the world, but it's roughly $20. I think. Is that right, Andrew?
Yeah, $20, not $19.99 or whatever it is they let you specify in the store pages.
So we're definitely trying. We think it's a lot bigger game. There's a lot going on. And we're aspiring to kind of move up from the. It's a very, very tricky pricing a game. Obviously, as you know. Obviously we're not a $70 game, but we're equally, when you start going below $10, it gets tricky.
Yeah.
In terms of
20 quid is some pretty typical indie game pricing, like either that or like $15.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I mean, it'd probably be a discount. It'd probably be people, but if you watch for a sale, depends on the platform. $15.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. A lot of publishers and developers do release a game at a higher price point in order to get a discount, especially on Steam.
Yeah, I mean, Steam's insane. You just literally don't sell a copy until you're on sale. It's just bonkers platform. And that's human nature, I guess. But yeah, no, we and also, but we, if you go cheap, you potentially devalue your own product a little bit.
Yeah, I think that was one of the problems with the original. Because it's currently I think it's like £5, probably about $7 on Steam at the moment, which again doesn't really give much scope for discount. And a lot of people have said, I mean, they're confused. Why is it so cheap? And yeah, a lot of people I've spoken to say, yeah, go at such a low price, it definitely devalues the game, lowers perceived value.
Right. And in terms of the PC platform, is this Windows only, or are there builds for Mac and Linux?
Yeah, Mac and Linux, and it works absolutely brilliantly. Although we haven't gone and got the certification, it works amazingly well on Steam Deck as well.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah,
we haven't really thought about that. Well, we should go and get the certification, really, shouldn't we?
Yeah, interestingly, Steam. I got an email in my inbox one day for the original version that just said, "Congratulations, Formula Retro Racing has been Steam Deck approved," and even.
Oh, so maybe it's just something we have to.
So maybe they do it automatically.
We don't have to do it; just happen.
But yeah, I mean, considering the code is pretty much, same as the original, as far as anything like rendering and that kind of thing is concerned.
But there's also a Linux build, and it'll run the Linux build if
of course, it'd probably actually run better than the.
It should
the original.
Run.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried the new one on Steam Deck, and it's just solid 60 FPS all the way anyway. So it's...
and because we've done the interface for the Switch already, it sort of is designed for that form factor, really, I guess, or it works for that form factor.
Yeah, and it's one of the few games I play on a Steam Deck that doesn't have the fan going 100% the whole time.
Well, that's the other joy. I just love working on a game that isn't. Well, the other product we work on at the moment is a bit over the other way, and I'm like, oh no, I much prefer this because it's I'm not trying to push any barriers of performance. We're just trying to make the best game we can, the funnest game we can. Sometimes people get a bit. I think programmers and studios and whatever can get a bit over carried away with trying to make a best of this, best of that, visually particularly. It's just like, well, why don't we say something fun? Best of fun, that should be a criteria, not a visual one. So that's kind of where we're that's what we're trying to kind of do, and it's a relief not having to worry about all these other features. Yeah, I've lost my thread entirely there. I'm stopped moaning too much.
It's fine. Right, so I think I've run through my gamut of questions. I'll see if my colleagues here have anything further for you.
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. Right then. So it was lovely having both of you on the program today.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, to talk about your game. And I look forward to seeing it come out in the very near future. And that is Formula Retro Racing World Tour. It is currently slated to come out March 31st. So not too far away from the moment of broadcast, and it's slated to come at $19.99 USD. If you want to try before you buy, there is a demo on Steam. So be sure to go download that or wishlist it today, and happy racing for when it comes out. Right,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. Right then. So yeah, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Be sure to tune in next time for the Sunday reviews on a Monday. Scheduling happened there, and people had to do things. So till then, I shall wish you good gaming.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Cheers.